I was a hippie.
It's Sissy's Soup.
Well, back in the early 70s, I was a hippie like most everybody else my age. It was an unsettling time. We were in an unpopular war. There was a lot of racial tension. The president was accused of criminal acts. Sound familiar so far? And peace and love were on everybody's lips, if not in their hearts. Well, in 1967, the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Jimi Hendrix came out and the Cream. In 1968, we lost Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Bobby Kennedy. In 1969 was Woodstock and the first moon landing. And that was the year I started high school. Boys and girls had long hair, ratty jeans, and no underwear. It was a groovy time. Boy, were we naive. There was a lot of talk about peace and love, which for some people meant drugs and sex, particularly the boys around here. Most people's parents were just horrified by the thought of drugs and permissive sex, and they supported the war in Vietnam. But the young people were horrified by the war in Vietnam. But we were all for getting high and free love. Free love meant sex, and trust me on this, sex is seldom free. It just about always costs somebody something. So when I was dating, there was a lot of pressure on girls to be cool about sex and not to be too clingy. We were supposed to be able to have sex just for fun and nothing else. The boys loved it, and as usual, the girls got the short end of the stick. My grandma used to tell me, if you give away the milk, no one will buy the cow. I used to think that was so old-fashioned. Now I know she was just trying to save me some grief. The boys would say, "Don't be such an uptight chick." That's cringy, isn't it? I caught on pretty quick, but some of my girlfriends weren't so lucky. Velma Thompson had her first baby at 16 years of age. Love, love, love. That's what the Beatles sang about, and we thought we knew what it meant. We were going to have peace and love, and if you didn't agree, we were going to kick your butt. You can see how silly that sounds now, but so many people were caught up in it. The boys had a lot of anxiety about having to go to Vietnam because of the draft. You see, any young man could be called to serve and forced to go to war, a war we didn't believe in or support. Everybody was on edge, and that's where smoking pot came in. It took the edge off. In those days, if you went to a party or just went over to somebody's house, inevitably somebody would roll a joint, light it up, and pass the Dutchie on the left-hand side. That was just normal then. And this was going on right under our parents' noses. I think our parents just didn't want to know what we were really doing. There was a strong sense of us against them, the young against the establishment. The generation gap wore everybody out. We didn't trust anybody over 30. That created a personal crisis for me on my 30th birthday, let me tell you. Well, there were rock festivals too. Did you ever see the Woodstock movie? Well, I went to a few festivals, and one of them really stands out in my mind. It was up in Levy County. I don't know who decided to have a festival there. Levy County is like redneck heaven. I can't even remember who played there, nobody particularly famous. Well, at one of these festivals, you would get your blanket set up where you could see the stage where you wanted to be, and then you just stay in that spot and not move for the whole 2 or 3 days. Well, we partied all day Saturday at that festival, watching band after band, and I fell asleep or passed out sometime after midnight. I woke up when the sun came up, and I couldn't believe what I saw. In a line in front of the stage were probably 50 police officers in riot gear. My friends and I got to our car and got out of there as quick as we could. As far as I could tell, the only thing going on was some drinking and pot smoking. It was peaceful as can be. I guess they just didn't want a bunch of stoned hippies up there in Levy County. Now, one thing that it took me a while to understand was that boys could have long hair and smoke pot and still be misogynistic, homophobic, racist. I learned that lesson over time. Well, let me tell you one quick story that's kind of funny. Bubba told me this story. I think I was a senior in high school when it happened. Bubba used to have a house down the street he rented when he was in his early 20s. Young people used to go over there all the time and hang out and party. Well, one day they brought him a bag of about 40 psilocybin mushrooms, magic mushrooms. Every cow pasture used to be full of them after a good rain. Well, Bubba didn't think they would do anything. He tasted one, he liked the taste, and so he decided to cook them. He was dating this guy at the time who was coming over for dinner. Bubba's a vegetarian now, but then he still ate meat, and he made steak and fries and cooked up those magic mushrooms. Well, they chowed down on them, and they weren't expecting anything to happen, really. But in about a half an hour, Bubba was giggling hysterically, and his boyfriend was sick to his stomach. That happens sometimes when you take mushrooms. Well, Bubba told him he'd feel better if he threw up. But the boy didn't feel like throwing up yet, and he asked Bubba, "How am I going to throw up?" Bubba said he'd read that if you drank some warm water with mustard in it, it was an emetic. It would make you throw up. I think it's supposed to be powdered mustard, but Bubba didn't have any of that. He only had some French's mustard in the refrigerator. Well, he put a spoonful of that mustard in some warm water, stirred it up, and gave it to his friend to drink. Well, it didn't make him throw up. It just made him feel sicker. But Bubba was so high, he just kept sitting there and giggling, and his poor boyfriend was moaning and groaning, and he was giggling all night till it wore off. They ended up being together for 17 years, and that's a fact. Isn't that a trip? Well, Bubba and I have grown up now, and we're both pretty square. We still believe in peace and love, but now we know we have to work on ourselves first. Drugs are not the answer. Well, bad as I hate to, I have to say, it's good to quit talking to you. Now go out there and spread peace and love everywhere you go. Go on. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.